everyone, and welcome to week 28. This week I'm going to start covering some of the new features that are in Record 1.5 and Reason 5. Now with the addition of the Kong Drum Designer in Reason 5, there's going to be a lot of tips and tricks that I have for you on just that one device. So I wanted to start off by covering a feature that I think is pretty fun and exciting, and that's the Nurse Rex loop module and the chunk trigger hit type function. What I'm going to show you is how to take a Rex loop, load it into the Nurse Rex loop player, and assign sections of that loop to be played back on different pads inside of Kong. Well, we have a lot to do, so let's have right at it. There are a few different techniques for using Rex loops in your music, and each will give you different results. Depending on whether the Rex loop is just a drum loop, or if it contains a musical phrase, it might change how you use it in the context of a track. The most common and simplest way to use a Rex loop is just to load the loop and have it play back exactly as it sounds. Another method that is used quite a lot in hip-hop production is to chop up a drum loop so that you can use the individual drum hits, like the kick, the snare, or the hats, as the drum samples for your drum tracks. The third method is to chop up the loop into sections and to trigger and re-trigger those sections in a different order to make a new musical phrase or drum beat out of the original loop. For example, taking a 1-bar loop and triggering the second beat, then the third beat, and then maybe the first beat twice. Prior to having Kong in the Nurse Rex module, achieving this third method could be a bit difficult with the Dr. Rex loop player, but as you will see a bit later in the video, things have changed. The first example of just loading a loop and triggering it to play is quite simple with Kong. Just create a new Kong device, select the Nurse Rex as the module for pad 1, load your loop, and you're good to go. You can trigger the pad, which will play the loop in its entire length, and you can re-trigger it from the beginning each time you hit the pad. Of course, if you change the tempo of the song, the loop's tempo would change as well. For the second example, I've created a template which will take all the slices of a Rex loop that is loaded and map them out to 16 individual pads in Kong using the chunk Trig function, and you can get that from this download link. Basically, what happens with chunk Trig is this. Load a Rex loop and assign multiple pads to trigger the same Nurse Rex module using the drum assignment section over here. Now, as you play the pads, you can hear that the same loop is being triggered on all the pads, and it's starting from the beginning of the loop each time. If you change the hit type to chunk trig for each pad, and I suggest using the quick edit mode as the fastest way to do this, notice this section right here and how it starts breaking up the Rex loop into sections. If I were to use all 16 pads, then you can see how much the Rex loop gets chopped up, and you can very quickly have separate slices assigned to separate pads in Kong. You can also check where the slice start or end is for each pad by moving the drag to resize chunks section right over here. For the template I've created, all you need to do is load your Rex loop into the Nurse Rex loop player that is selected on pad 1, and it will automatically get chopped up into 16 slices and mapped to the 16 pads. The third method of breaking a loop up into sections or beats uses the same chunk trig function, except that we only use either 2, 4, or maybe 8 pads to chop it up. Here I have a musical phrase, and what I want to do is play the phrase in a totally different way. I'm going to do this by using 4 pads that are assigned to the same drum pad assignment and then selecting chunk trig as their hit type. I can see that the loop has been chopped up into equal 1-beat sections. I can easily change where the triggers are by again using that drag to resize chunks function. And now I can replay the phrase to be exactly how I want it. The thing that makes this unique is that in order to do this prior to Kong, you would have had to set slices in recycle to be exactly where you wanted them. Then, if you change the tempo of the song to something other than the original tempo of the loop would not follow the change, since there were no slices in between. But using the nurse rex loop module in Kong and this chunk trig feature, I can always change the tempo and it will follow right along. I've also made some templates for using either 2, 4, or 8 pads when you're using the chunk trigger setup, and they're all part of the download that you can get from this link here. Well, that's it for this week. Again, I'm James Bernard from Propellerhead Software, and I'll see you all next week.